I never imagined a single night could completely wreck my mind. But standing there, in the middle of the flashing lights, with the bass vibrating through my body and the taste of vodka still lingering on my lips, I knew something had shifted. The party was everything it was supposed to be: loud, messy, limitless. A space where nothing needed explanation, where people could be whoever they wanted, love whoever they wanted, without fear, without hesitation. The air was thick with liberation, bodies moving against each other, laughter spilling over the music. I had come here expecting a night of fun, of reckless dancing, of bad decisions that wouldn't matter in the morning. I hadn't expected her. Lauren. She had been my best friend for years, the kind of friendship that had seen me through heartbreaks, drunk confessions at 3 a.m., the stress of finals, and the quiet, steady certainty that no matter what, we'd always have each other. She was familiar, her warm hazel eyes, the dimple that only appeared when she was trying not to laugh, the way she always smelled faintly of vanilla and something else, something undeniably her. She had always been in my life like a constant, a fixed point in the chaos. And then she kissed me. I don't even know how it happened. 1 second, we were laughing, swaying to the beat, the alcohol making everything feel lighter, easier. And then suddenly, her hands were on my waist, her face inches from mine, and before my brain could even catch up, her lips were on me.
Soft, warm,
intentional. My heart slammed against my ribs, my breath catching in my throat. Every single sound around us, the music, the crowd, the clinking of drinks, vanished. All I could feel was her, the familiar press of her body, but with a tension that had never been there before. It lasted only a few seconds, just long enough for me to process the heat of her mouth, the way her fingers tightened slightly against my hips, like maybe for a second, she felt it too. And then she pulled away. Too fast. Her eyes were wide, lips parted, like she was just as stunned as I was. But before I could even think about what to say, before I could grab onto something solid to make sense of it, she let out a short, nervous laugh. "This doesn't mean anything," she said, her voice too light, too casual.
forced.
My stomach twisted. Then she smiled, that same easy, carefree grin I'd seen 1,000 times before, except this time, it didn't feel the same. "I'm straight," she added, like that explained everything, like it erased what had just happened. And just like that, she grabbed my hand, tugging me back toward the crowd, back toward the chaos of the party, as if she hadn't just flipped my entire world upside down. As if she hadn't just taken something undeniably real and shoved it into a box, sealing it shut before I could even begin to understand what was inside. But it happened. And no matter how hard she tried to pretend it didn't, I felt it. And now I had no idea what the hell I was supposed to do with that. I spent the rest of the night trying to make sense of it. Trying to breathe normally, trying to act normal, trying to convince myself that it hadn't meant anything, just like she had said. But my body betrayed me. My lips still tingled where hers had been. My skin still remembered the warmth of her hands on my waist. Every time I closed my eyes, the memory replayed in perfect detail, cruelly vivid, refusing to let me escape it. But Lauren? She didn't seem any different. She danced like nothing had happened, laughing at something a stranger whispered in her ear. She tossed her hair over her shoulder, flirted shamelessly with some guy leaning against the bar, ran her fingers over his forearm the same way she had just touched me. The same fingers that had curled against my waist, the same mouth that had pressed against mine only minutes ago. The room felt too loud, the music pounding against my skull, and yet I barely heard it. All I could hear was the single sentence that had wrecked me. "This doesn't mean anything." It was so easy for her. A casual dismissal, a throwaway moment she could walk away from. But I wasn't walking away. I was drowning in it. And I needed answers. It took me too long to find the nerve to pull her aside. I caught her elbow when she was mid-laugh, flashing that same easy Lauren smile at someone I didn't recognize. Her drink sloshed slightly in her glass as she turned to me, surprised, but not concerned. Not affected. Unlike me. "We need to talk," I said, louder than I meant to, trying to be heard over the thick bass vibrating through the floor. Lauren blinked, clearly caught off guard. But then, that grin, the one that had always felt like home, but now felt like a wall. "Talk about what?" she asked, tilting her head. Like she didn't know. Like she hadn't just turned my world upside down. My grip on her wrist tightened slightly, just enough to let her know I was serious. Without waiting for her to protest, I pulled her toward a quieter corner, away from the pulsing music, away from the weight of watching eyes. I turned to face her, my stomach in knots, my pulse furious in my veins. What the hell was that? Lauren blinked again, her brows pulling together in a frown. "Was what?" she said, her voice too easy, too casual. I stared at her, really stared. The dim lighting cast sharp shadows over her face, highlighting the way her lips were still pink from the drink she had just sipped. The same lips that had been on mine. I exhaled sharply, my patience wearing thin. "The kiss, Lauren." My voice dropped lower, but it wasn't calm. It was shaking. "You kissed me." For a second, just a second, something flickered in her eyes. Something unreadable. Something that almost looked like regret. But then, just like that, she laughed. A soft, light, effortless laugh. Like this was a joke. Like I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. "Oh, that's..." She waved a hand, dismissing it like it was an accident. Like it wasn't still burning on my skin. "It was just a kiss," she said, her tone playful, like she thought this was hilarious. We were in the moment, you know? The party, the music, the drinks, it wasn't a big deal. I didn't breathe. I couldn't. Because those words, those stupid, careless words, felt like whiplash. I had been struggling to stand, and she had just knocked my legs out from under me. "Not a big deal?" I repeated, the words nearly tasteless in my mouth. She shrugged, her grin still there, but smaller now.
Yeah.
"I mean, come on, you know me. You know I'm straight." She rolled her eyes a little, as if this entire conversation was absurd. As if I was absurd for even bringing it up. "Straight." The word clawed at me, sharp and cold, digging into my ribs like a wound I didn't know how to close. I wanted to laugh, I almost did, because how could she say that? How could she look at me, at what just happened, and expect me to believe it was nothing? I swallowed, my throat tight. "Then why did you do it?" Lauren opened her mouth.
Paused.
And then, after an agonizing second, she shook her head, that carefree smile slipping just enough for me to notice. "I don't know," she admitted, too quickly, like she just wanted this conversation to be over. She turned slightly, shifting her weight, as if ready to rejoin the party, ready to shove this into the depths of things that don't matter. But I couldn't move, because suddenly I understood. We weren't in the same story. For her, this was a moment. A passing, fleeting impulse. Something she could file away as a drunken mistake. Something she could ignore in the morning. But for me, it was a wrecking ball, slamming through everything I thought I knew. And I had no idea if I was supposed to pick up the pieces, or let them bury me whole. In the days that followed, everything between us felt off. I tried to act normal. Tried to fall back into our usual rhythm, inside jokes, late-night texts, coffee runs that stretched longer than necessary. But it was impossible to pretend that nothing had changed when everything had. It was in the way my body tensed every time she touched me, even in the smallest, most innocent ways. A hand on my shoulder, a knee brushing against mine under the table, fingers briefly grazing when she passed me a drink. All of it felt different now. Too much. Too charged. Worse than the touches were the words, the way she still called me by that stupid nickname only she used, the one that had always made me smile. Now, every time she said it, my chest tightened, because it meant she wasn't thinking about the way she had kissed me, the way her lips had lingered on mine for just a second too long before she tore herself away. It meant she wasn't losing sleep over it. It meant she had filed it away while I was stuck reliving it. And maybe the worst part? Lauren wasn't acting any different. She still flirted with guys, still laughed too loudly at dumb jokes, still tossed her hair over her shoulder like she had no idea what she had done to me. She still leaned against me on the couch, still stretched across my bed during movie nights, still looked at me with that same easy warmth, like she hadn't knocked the air out of my lungs with a single, careless kiss. And I was supposed to just live with it? I tried. I really did. But the weight of it was like an iron bar pressing down on my ribs, a quiet, suffocating thing I couldn't shake. And then one night, it all spilled over. Lauren was at my apartment, curled up on my couch like she belonged there, a half-empty mug of tea in her hands. It was late, too late for company, but that had never stopped her before. She had always come and gone freely in my space, like she had the right to. But now, I couldn't look at her without remembering the way she had kissed me. I stared at her, really stared, and the words left my mouth before I could stop them. "Do you really think that meant nothings?" She blinked, her fingers tightening around the mug, the only betrayal of tension in her otherwise relaxed posture.
She didn't look at me.
She just stared down at her tea, like if she avoided my eyes long enough, the question would disappear. Seconds dragged. And then, finally, she sighed. "I don't know," she admitted, so softly I almost didn't hear it. "I just don't think I'm like that."
Like that.
Two little words that felt like a slap. Like there was a line, and I was on the wrong side of it. Like there was a right way and a wrong way to feel. My jaw clenched, and something hot and ugly twisted inside me. "Do you not think," I said, my voice sharp, "or are you just afraid to think?" That got her attention. Her head snapped up, and for the first time in days, I saw something real in her eyes. Something that wasn't dismissal or avoidance. Something that almost looked like fear. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Because she didn't have an answer. Because the problem had never been me. It was her. I had spent so much time trying to decode that kiss, what it meant to Lauren, what it said about her, whether it was real or just some impulse she'd already forgotten, that I never stopped to ask myself the most important question. What did it mean to me? I had been so caught up in her reaction, in the way she had laughed it off, in the way she had erased it before I even had the chance to process it, that I hadn't given myself the space to really feel it, to own it. I had let her set the rules, let her define what was real and what wasn't, as if my feelings didn't matter, as if my reality could be overwritten by hers. But the truth was, I felt it. I knew what that kiss had done to me. It wasn't just some fleeting moment, wasn't just the side effect of alcohol and a good time. It had been charged, heavy with something we had never spoken about, something I had never dared to consider until her lips were on mine. It had been a collision, something that shook me to my core, something that couldn't be undone just because she wanted it to. Lauren could pretend all she wanted. She could bury it, shove it into some corner of her mind labeled mistakes to forget, convince herself that it had been nothing more than a second of recklessness. But I knew better. And maybe that was the most painful part, knowing that we had felt the same thing, but she was too scared to admit it. So, when she stood from my couch that night, running a hand through her hair like she wanted to shake off whatever tension still hung between us, I didn't stop her. She hesitated at the door, her fingers lingering on the knob, her back still to me. Maybe she was waiting for me to say something, to ask her to stay, to give her a reason to turn around. But I didn't. I just watched as she walked out. And I didn't chase her. For so long, I had felt responsible for her confusion. Like it was my job to help her make sense of it, to convince her that she didn't need to be afraid of whatever was happening between us. But that wasn't my burden to carry. It never had been. So I stayed where I was, standing in the middle of my apartment, the silence pressing in around me. The air felt lighter somehow, as if the weight of her uncertainty had finally been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't relieved, not exactly. There was still a dull ache in my chest, a quiet mourning for something that had barely begun before it was ripped away. But for the first time since that night at the party, I breathed freely. Because in the end, it wasn't my responsibility to make Lauren understand her own feelings. It was hers. And I had my own to take care of.